Welcome to Creepypasta. Please like, share and subscribe. This will help us make more content for you. Thank you.
I answered a call at work from another dimension. So few key things here before I get into it. 1. I work the front desk at an internal medicine clinic. 2. All the phones are Cisco phones that have caller ID and a history log. 3. I've worked here for 3 years and I know pretty much all of the patients extremely well. So well, that our doctor will ask me if someone is our patient or not, because I can remember extremely insignificant details off the top of my head, such as a person's middle initial in their name. 4. I'm the only person who works the front desk, so unless I'm already on a call, I answer every phone call coming into the clinic. 5. Because I answer every call, I know many patients just by the sound of their voice, especially if they call frequently. 6. The doctor I work for doesn't take new patients, so we don't have an extremely high number of patients. This is also why I know so many patients so well, because it's mostly the same people over and over with rarely any new faces to learn. 7. The patient in question during this event, I know super well, because he has the pseudobulbar effect, where you cry or laugh in inappropriate situations. I worked there when he was diagnosed, and it's kind of a rare disease, so I remember him especially well, because he often has episodes in the waiting room, while checking in, and I try to make him as comfortable as possible, by acting as if nothing is out of the ordinary. I would say he's one of my favorites, because he is a very sweet and kind man regardless, and has treated me with nothing but respect. Unfortunately not the case for all of our patients. 8. Because of the current situation, and given that most of our patients come to appointments with no acute problems, the office is doing pretty much every appointment as telemedicine, with a few exceptions here and there, for things that absolutely can't be treated over the phone. 9. Telemedicine here is just a normal phone call, because the physician isn't very tech-savvy. The majority of our patient population is geriatric, so they really aren't tech-savvy either, so we don't do video chat or anything like that. 10. The office is small, we have 1 physician, 2 nurses, and me, front desk, and I work in a separate, but very open room, with a big checkout window, and a door on the same side, that stays open, facing the desk that the physician and 1 nurse sit at. We can just talk normally across the room to hear each other. So generally, I kinda zone out while the doctor is doing telemedicine appointments, but subconsciously listen for certain key words, or phrases that he usually says every single time, before he sends the call to me, when he's done to schedule the patient's next follow-up appointment. I'm halfway listening, and I know that he's on the phone, and this patient calls in, that I mentioned earlier with the pseudobulbar effect. We'll call him Mr. L, and Mr. L says that he was on the phone with the doctor for his telemedicine appointment, but the call dropped. Not a big deal, this happens somewhat often. I said back to him, I think he's on the phone with someone right now, let me check for you, hold on 1 second, and put him on hold. I was double-checking that he was on a patient call, and not a personal call. The doctor will literally talk on his cell phone to friends about everything in the world, hunting, fishing, football, you get the picture. He's older and doesn't really text, just talks on the phone a lot, all the time, but he'll only call patients on the desk Cisco phone. So, I see that he was talking on the desk phone, obviously talking to a patient. I assume he would never make a personal call on the Cisco desk phones, because our company records every phone call, and I picked the phone back up after being put on hold, and said, Hey Mr. L. He's on the phone with another patient right now, just stay by your phone and I'll get him to call you right back. But when I picked it back up from hold, there wasn't anyone there. So I start saying, hello, a few times before hanging up, because it was just dead silent. The nurse who sits behind the doctor, on the other side of the room, turns around to face me and says, wait, who did you just hang up with? And I was like, Mr. L, why? She replied back to me and said, because that's who he's talking to right now. Keep in mind, the doctor is still on the phone, as she's telling me this. And she tells me, he's been on the phone with Mr. L this entire time. I knew without a doubt from the moment Mr. L called in, that the doctor was on a call already, and was on this call the entire time with zero interruptions. Me and the nurse are just extremely bewildered by this, and by the time the doctor was done with his call, and sent it to me to schedule the next appointment, I asked Mr. L if his call dropped at any point in time, or if he called the office in the last few minutes. For our telemedicine appointments, the doctor calls the patient, not the other way around. He told me, well, I dropped my phone on the floor, but I just picked it back up and kept talking. He seemed confused by my question, so I didn't push it any further. Me and the nurse who realized this, then checked the call log history, and it confirmed that the doctor's phone had a call with Mr. L for around 13 minutes, without interruption, and my phone also had a call during that call, from the same number. His first and last name also shows up on caller ID, and it was on both phones. I also confirmed with the doctor that his call with Mr. L was never interrupted. When I told him what happened, he just chuckled, and said we were living in the twilight zone, and had zero logical explanation for it. I also recognized his voice, and there is zero doubt in my mind that it was indeed Mr. L I spoke to. So, the only reasonable explanation the nurse that witnessed this and I could seem to come up with, is that maybe in another dimension, when Mr. L dropped his phone on the floor, it did drop the call, and when he called back, I answered in this dimension, but he was disconnected after I put him on hold, since it was radio silence after I picked it back up. Honestly, if you have any reasonable explanations, other than it was just someone else calling in, because I know that was impossible. The call history log backed up it was the exact same phone number and I know it was his voice, feel free to shoot them below. I'm honestly just mind blown by this, and while I was never disbelieving of alternate dimensions before, I was skeptical because of lack of hardcore proof, but this has definitely convinced me. TLDR, I answered a phone call from a person who was simultaneously talking to someone else in the same room, and this was backed up by a call history log. I should note that the nurse who experienced this as well, said she had a few other strange things happen to her earlier that day before this incident. 1, she said that her son sent her a Snapchat saying, "It'll buff out," randomly. She replied back, "What are you talking about?" thinking he sent it to her accidentally. But nope, he said that she sent him a Snapchat of a huge scratch on her new car, and he replied, "It'll buff out," except there was no scratch on her new car. I guess you could say maybe someone else sent him a scratch on their car, but he swears it was his mom's new car, and she sent it to him. 2, her boyfriend sent her a text message saying, "Haha, that's so funny," to a meme she supposedly tagged him in on Facebook, but she said she never tagged him in one, and when he tried to go back and find it, it wasn't there. I will say she mentioned these things to me before the incident above, but I honestly just brushed it off, thinking that maybe they were just confused, as these could be easy things to mix up. I don't think she just got excited and started making stuff up, after what happened with Mr. L, because she mentioned it before that happened.
Comments. Yeah, if the normal post didn't confirm a glitch, then this follow-up definitely did. There might have been some next-level quantum entanglement going on there. That's a lot of glitches.
In my opinion, you definitely experienced a slip of some sort. Meaning a parallel universe and our universe were intertwined for a moment. It's like the universe split into two separate universes at that moment, and you remember experiencing both of them. Edit, kinda like Schrödinger's cat. You see the cat alive, or dead, not both. But the cat is simultaneously alive and dead. In this case, you experienced a universe where the call was dropped, but also experienced one where the call didn't drop. It's like you got tangled in a dimensional split. Like when people make choices, it creates multiple timelines, and you experienced two different ones at the same time. Very odd. Sorry for rambling.
Very interesting theory. I think you're right. I've always found parallel universe, alternate dimension theories interesting, albeit I was skeptical of most stories I've heard across the internet. My stance has definitely since changed.
I would say that when he dropped the phone, the call got put on hold. The patient heard a dial tone, called the office where you answered. Then he hung up, heard the doctor on the line, and then continued his conversation. As for why the doctor never noticed, he could have been talking for several minutes and not even noticed that the call was, temporarily, suspended. I've had this happen several times in conference calls. Either the speaker goes on without realizing he disconnected or talks on mute, not realizing no one is hearing them.
I definitely agree with you that the doctor could have just been talking without noticing if there was a disconnection. However, his phone call history only had one consistent 13-minute call from the same phone number and caller ID. This patient's first and last name show up on caller ID. Not all of them do, but his does. That called my phone at a time that was during the middle of their conversation. So, without a doubt it came from the exact same phone number, which was also a cell phone, I suppose I should add. He also acted very confused when I asked him if his call had dropped with the doctor and if he called the office back at any point in time. He was very clear that when he dropped it, he just picked it back up and continued his conversation with the doctor. He doesn't have memory issues, at least none that we have ever noticed or diagnosed as his primary care physician's office, so I have a hard time believing he called and spoke to me and just forgot about it in the span of a few minutes. It's just very strange.
Do you have a creepy story? Please share it with us in the comments, and we will post it on the channel. Please subscribe. Thank you.